It's time for Getting Down to Business with Mark Mondo. This new show discusses trends, technology, and tactics to help the listener learn more about improving sales, saving money, and fulfilling a personal mission through entrepreneurship.
Today we'll interview Chandra Spary of Card Systems. She's going to teach us how to keep more of our money when getting paid by credit cards, as well as protect us from embezzlement.
Welcome to Getting Down to Business with Mark Mondo on WVLP 103.1 FM. I'm your host, Mark Mondo. We're on the air in Valparaiso, Indiana, and you can listen to us streaming on the website at wvlp.org or use the TuneIn app on your mobile device and look for WVLP. 103.1 FM WVLP is a local nonprofit radio station based in Valparaiso, Indiana. This show, like many others on WVLP, are made possible by the generosity of donors and underwriters. We accept donations at wvlp.org. Simply click on the support tab and make a one-time donation or sustained pledge to WVLP. All donations are tax deductible. Underwriters are made up of businesses and organizations that support the shows on WVLP. Getting Down to Business with Mark Mondo would like to thank Homes by Hortensia, a Coldwell Banker affiliate in Porter County, Indiana, for their support. Homes by Hortensia has served the region's residential real estate needs in Indiana for over 12 years. Contact Hortensia Moreno at 219-249-5118 or visit homesbyhortensia.com. Homes by Hortensia, habla español.
The script.
Welcome to the show. In case you're a new listener, here's my backstory. I've been a consultant for small businesses for the last 25 years, helping small businesses implement customer relationship management software, aka a CRM system, where I learn their business processes and customize the software to help them become more efficient in sales, marketing, or customer service. However, there's much more to becoming a success in business than just having a good CRM system. That's why I bring on guests to tell their stories and share tips on either technology, tactics, or trends they use to become successful. So let's get into it and introduce everyone here today. To my one side is the producer. She's the star soprano, and she's my wife. It's Mrs. Cynthia Zimmerman.
Hello, hello.
And our guest today is Chandra Spary-Kontinos. She is the founder and CEO of Card Systems out of Cape Coral, Florida, with over 30 years of experience in the merchant service industry. She's a member of a couple trade associations, including the RSPA, which is known as the Retail Solutions Provider Association, and ETA, Electronic Transaction Association. Chandra has lent her expertise to several boards, including the First Data Advisory Board and the Riverside Bank Community Board. Her philanthropy includes supporting the Lee Memorial Health System, the Golisano Children's Hospital, Ronald McDonald House, and also holds an emeritus position at the Dress for Success Board in Southwest Florida. Chandra also works with her husband, Thomas Kontinos, to run eGuarded, a background screening and private investigation firm. Wow, that was a lot. Welcome, Chandra.
Thank you, Mark. Pleasure to be on.
Hey, well, thanks for coming all the way from, we'll talk about where your secret location at the end of the show.
Okay.
So we'll tease that up for later. In the meantime, I'm going to start talking about, today's topic is about getting paid. So when I started my company in 1997, it was relatively easy. I installed QuickBooks, I set up some invoices, and I mailed them. Everyone was on terms by default, and I just get checks in the mail 10 to 20 days later after I mail my invoices. Well, that really seems quaint by today's standards. For me, terms are now the exception to the rule, and the majority of my revenue is processed by a credit card. And I've also adapted my business to have my vendors take product payments, then pay me commissions on the back end while they handle sales tax. But I know I can still be more efficient. So I thought it'd be helpful today to educate business owners on how to get paid quickly while minimizing bank charges along the way. I still get checks vaporized by the USPS once in a while, and I bet some of our listeners had similar problems waiting for clients to pay them so they can make payroll and suppliers. So that's why I brought in Chandra. She knows all things about this. Chandra, we didn't wake up being born to know all this stuff. What's your origin story and how did you get here?
Well, Mark, it was a long road. We've been in business for over 30 years now, but prior to that, we were in printing and publishing and software services.
Mm-hmm.
And we had the same challenges you did with getting paid. When we would bill customers, right, we'd be out 30, 60, 90 days. And it was horrible. We weren't even taking credit cards way back in the day. So, and when we had the software company, we ended up being in that same boat. And they ended up having challenges with merchant providers. Hence, Card Systems was born. And we've seen a terrific change over the last 30 years in payment processing. Do you all remember when we used to look through the books to see bad card numbers back in the day to decline cards, imprint the card, the card and take it to the bank to deposit? Well,
Kinda.
do you remember that? There was a little book. Well, now obviously everything's electronic.
Oh, no, I didn't have that. I mean, I worked in retail in the mid 80s and I remember that kind of, it was like a printing press, like this big press thing, and you'd put like a triple carbon copy form, and you had that ka-chunk, and it would...
Knuckle buster.
What was it? A knuckle buster.
That's what we called it, the knuckle
Credit
buster.
card swiper.
Yeah.
And you had to do it just right, have the right pressure. Otherwise, all 3 carbon copies wouldn't go through. So,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And there was a list. Well, now that list is huge because of fraud and everything in our space. So technology has come a long way, and it has, now you can tap and pay, you can use your wallet to pay. There's a myriad ways that you can optimize your payments in the space, but of course they're all individual. You take many of your payments online. Some of our clients are retail, some are restaurants. They're all over the board. So not one solution fits, every merchant. So there's a myriad of different ways to optimize and make payments.
See, that's why I brought you in, because I know like maybe 2. So one thing that I've seen with some vendors that I work with, like let's say a plumber or somebody comes in, does home repair at my place, they usually will just take a check. Once in a while, they're like, oh, we get paid in cash. I'll give you a cash discount. I'm like, all right, at least give me a cash receipt if we're going to go that route. Why can't people just take checks? I mean, I have in my notes something about a cost of taking checks.
Well, there's a cost of invoicing, number one. It used to be, remember when stamps were, 25 cents. Well, now they're up in the 70s.
Yep.
Invoicing, right now the cost is anywhere from $15 to $40 to pay somebody to invoice that invoice, send it out, and hope you get paid on the first, with the first invoice. So paper checks should be a thing of the past for everyone now. With credit cards now, debit cards, there's no reason that every merchant shouldn't be accepting a debit card at least. A lot of people like to take online checks as well. So that's something that we can do. That's an ACH process through the automated clearinghouse. That's a much, more cost-effective way of accepting payments. But not everyone is inclined to give you their routing number and their checking account.
That's new. Yeah, that's new to me. Cynthia, I hope I don't get this cut in post, but for our UK audience, it's a little different over there. They use a system called BACS, BACS, where they gladly give you their routing number and account number. They call it a sort number. They said, yeah, here's our BACS numbers. And they just published that fairly readily. And to me, that's been a little bit of a shock to me to open that up right away.
Right. And you do it by, typically the old gym memberships, right? Or the donations where you're automatically recurring. Whoever you trust to do that, it's become more and more used and acceptable, but it still is scary out there with all that fraud. I mean, anybody can print checks right now off, create their own checks and print them out of QuickBooks and, hit your bank accounts.
Well, we're going to talk about that later. You've got some pretty cool, tough stories. I mean, cool, like as in they're scary and fearful, but you're going to show us how to work around that. But one of the things that somebody may be asking that's new to the business is, well, I got my bank over at big national bank and name it, Wells Fargo, Chase, Bank of America. Why can't I just, if I'm a new business owner, why can't, as I get my checking done there, why wouldn't somebody just say, get my credit cards done by the same person? They'll offer it. It's one-stop shop, but what would, if you're advising somebody new, how would you help them save some money in that respect?
Well,
Even though it
banks are
sounds
there.
convenient.
Yes. Well, banks are there to, safeguard your money. Their primary purpose is to, do loans for you, handle your checking accounts, all of that. They sub out the merchant processing side of it. In fact, we've done a lot of bank agent programs to help them in the communities because, banks are there limited hours. Chances are when you have a problem with a credit card or your machine or funds being held, are they going to answer the phone after 5 o'clock or on the weekends or if your terminal breaks down? It's good to go with a merchant provider, somebody that will pick up the phone and answer your questions and help you, that's been in that business specifically, not just using this as an ancillary product. And that's what banks are doing, really.
All right. So say no to Chase and the big
Yes.
brand. Sorry, they're not under, I'm being.
Chase is an acquirer as well, but always have somebody that that you can reach out to because it's your money, really. And there's nothing worse than one of my restaurants on a Friday night going down. And luckily, my techs are right there to help them. But I've seen it all too many times when you've walked into a restaurant, hey, they can't accept credit cards, or a store, they're down. You never want to be down when it comes to money when you're in business.
They're collecting it at least. So.
Oh, absolutely. And even having a backup wireless, we have backup wireless systems for our clients because we're in Florida. We have a lot of storms, that type of thing. We never want to interrupt payments being processed.
Well, can people do that? And I think for small volume, it's okay. I did this when I started. I had a really small e-commerce site component to my website for a few years. And I took it down a few years ago because it just wasn't worth maintaining. But systems like PayPal, Square, Shopify they're really easy to set up. And I like that. The good news is they don't have monthly fees. PayPal doesn't for sure. I think Shopify might, but what's the good and the bad and the ugly when it comes to systems like that? They got great branding. I mean,
they do. Definitely. And they're good for the small merchants. If you're doing just a few thousand a month, they're perfect for you, right? If you're not doing high tickets, high volume, they're good for that. They have a place. They're aggregators. However, once you pass that threshold, you really need to get your own merchant account. Yeah, you just look more professional. It's better overall. You have a relationship with someone. Hence, all of a sudden, you do a $5,000 transaction right out of the norm. PayPal, Square, and Stripe, they tend to hold those transactions, and then you're in trouble. And you may not realize that and be writing checks out on that money already, and that could put you in a whole lot of trouble. Whereas if you're going with someone, you can pick up the phone and call. They can, let the bank know, hey, this is a one-time, we just made a large transaction, and your money may be held a day or so, but at least you'll be able to get someone.
Right. One
So
of the
that's
things
the
that,
big differential.
yeah, one of the things I'm wrestling as a business owner, and I guess to my audience, that one of the things we're wrestling with here is whether to, there's a cost to all this. Like, it's convenient. The bank is playing, I'm sorry, the bank, or who is called the interchange, the Visa, MasterCard. Are they called the
Visa and
interchangers?
MasterCard. Yeah, there's Visa and MasterCard, there's acquiring banks, and there's issuing banks. Acquiring banks acquire merchant accounts.
Yeah.
Sometimes
So,
they're the same, but rarely they are. And then there's also the issuing bank, which issues those wonderful reward cards that cost merchants so much money.
so there's a cost in there somewhere. No one's doing this for free.
No.
And what I've seen, even especially with smaller retailers, like I was talking about, the contractor that comes by and wants to fix my heater, and they'll say, look, in the old days, we just don't take credit cards at all because they could either charge it back, or there was a cost to it. But for the end user, the merchant has to pay somewhere. We're going to keep, obviously it can vary per transaction with several dozen variables that you've taught me over time, but let's just say 3% as a industry standard for a fee. What we're seeing, at least at the restaurant level or some very small retail providers, is they won't take credit cards, or they're passing it back. That seems to be either a pushback, or what is the trend with that? Because I think in the old days, people were just like, all right, I'll just take credit cards and eat the 3%. But I think people are having secondary thoughts about it.
They are,
especially the
yes.
smaller businesses, most likely. But tell us from a outside perspective what you're seeing from a retailer standpoint and all that.
Well, yes, these rewards cards, they started out to be small, but you all have, I'm sure, many cards in your wallet that do the 5% payback, right? Or a 1%.
Miles, we do airline miles. At least,
miles.
Cynthia, I don't know what you have differently. I got airline miles cards.
Oh, you do, yes, and so do I. And we stockpile those miles till until we want to use them. That is what's driven interchange up. When we were interchange, or the cost of taking credit cards, way back in the day, 30 years ago, there were only a few different levels of interchange. And as time moved on with these rewards cards, we're now up to over 800 different levels of interchange. It's very complex.
Okay.
And these reward cards are really pushing those fees up and up and up. Hence, merchants wanting to pass on the fees. So we're seeing that as a huge trend all over. Were they doing it correctly? No. They were just putting an amount on. And Visa and MasterCard, I mean, it is a privilege to accept cards through Visa and MasterCard. And they do have these rules that you need to follow. And they fought this surcharging, dual pricing, non-cash adjustment. It's been called many different things. Now there are 3 of them. There is a true surcharge, which Visa just regulated as a base. The max you can charge is 3%, and they can only do it on credit cards. Mm-hmm. Well, credit cards, now we have debit cards, which have almost replaced checks, which had a lower interchange. Now they are getting into the rewards program too. So they used to be a penny cost for a merchant. Now they are a percentage as well, and they're going up. So some merchants are giving the option to do surcharging, where they do the flat, and they'll eat the cost on the debit card. So they'll be down in the low ones. And by the way, most merchants should be way under 3% if they're taking cards correctly. And there's another product out there that's called a convenience fee. And I'm sure you've seen that before when you're ordering something on the web and it's a flat fee. That needs to be a total flat fee. So we see a lot of that around, but it truly needs to be a convenience per Visa MasterCard rules. Now what you're seeing in most states is what's called dual pricing. Dual pricing is showing the price of the cost of the product when you're paying with cash and the price with credit or debit. So That is the model that a lot of our merchants are veering to, because let's face it, if somebody's paying $4,000 a month in interchange fees, right? By doing dual pricing, all of a sudden they just put that $4,000 back into their company.
And that's something, as business owners, I'll speak for myself here. I've got to wrestle with that. I haven't raised the rates during the COVID era. I didn't raise anything. And like, wow, and I hit my, what do you call it, interchange fees? You know, the merchant account fees?
Yes, interchange fees.
That could be a couple nice, 2-3 nice dinners there, Cynthia.
It could.
I'm trying to make it as convenient and least resistant as possible for my clients to work with me, but I'm reluctant to raise our labor rates. But it's a dilemma as a service provider. I mean, we want to position ourselves as a high-end boutique service provider, but boy, it's something I look at every month like, wow, that I could put that money somewhere else, maybe, you know. So it might be a conversation Chandra's going to help me with on the side.
Yes, it is. You know, and our restaurants struggled with it at first, but then with the cost of chicken and eggs going up so high, they wanted to keep their prices low, right? We all do. We want to keep our prices as low as possible, but at least if you give people a choice, I think it's easier, and you convey it. You need to have it, prominently displayed on your site, or, in the door and on the slip. That's really important. And if you do that, I think customers are now understanding that because they're seeing it more and more.
I think consumers are more supportive of the smaller business having those options, because they know that in the end, the credit card companies and the third-party processors are, they're in it for the money. And so I get that a lot now. I notice with a lot of trades, personnel that I hired for, electrician or a plumber, and they say you can either pay in cash or I'll be putting a 3% charge on the total bill if you want to pay by credit card. And the fact that they tell you up front, and it's becoming more and more common, I get it. I understand why they have to do that, because they're not a multi-million-dollar company that can eat that 3% per transaction. So I think after COVID, a lot of people are much more sensitive to the individual, especially the small merchant, and the struggles of just trying to keep their business going. And they're, if not supportive, at least they're open-minded, understanding the situation and understanding that, going out to eat is going to be more expensive than it used to be. And it's up for me to decide whether I want to do it by cash or credit card.
Or, you know what? Yeah, there's another metric that even, made some social media video stuff. Why is McDonald's so expensive? Well, they're actually getting hit a little bit. I've been listening to a couple CNBC reports, and they said, well, people are going to eat out less. Mm-hmm. I mean, even if it's McDonald's, and when you interview the fast food, talk about national chains, the ones that have the moolah, they say, well, it's the labor costs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the CEO is getting paid a lot too. So, it's kind of interesting. I'll leave my commentary at that, but they are not eating that fee.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people are going to start having to push that around. So I may have to make those tough decisions this summer about, maybe passing some of that feedback. I just haven't gotten to it. I'm straightening out some other issues, but that's all right. This isn't about therapy about me and my business.
Let's move on.
Yes, we're moving on. Let's go into Cynthia, your experience with passing the fees, especially in the nonprofit world. It sounds like you I remember you spending a lot of nights going, well, I can't have dinner with you now because I'm working on reconciling merchant account statements.
Yes, that is true.
What are your donors doing?
And it's changed for the nonprofits. The way we usually got donations was people handing us a check or giving cash at a fundraiser or a check. Sometimes it would be people that would automatically have money sent to us through their stock options or their trust, but was never, rarely ever a credit card, because I think we're all old enough to know that credit cards were not easy to get growing up, especially as a young adult. And especially for women at some point, you were not able to get a credit card unless your husband signed off on it. So it's come a long way. Even when I was in college in the 80s, to have a credit card was almost, I don't want to say taboo, but it was something you did not take lightly. And you only had it if you really could afford to pay off the statement balance every month. I mean, that was the mantra that I was taught. And so my first credit card was a Sears credit card,
Nice.
which I used for emergency socks and, things like that. But I never used it. I couldn't use it really recklessly because there's not much I could get at Sears. It's much easier to do everything transactionally without cash or check. And as it became more readily available and people wanted to do it more and more, our donors kept asking, well, why don't you have, say, PayPal? Or why can't we pay by credit card? How can we pay by credit card? And before a lot of these third-party processing portals came online, that just really started to explode about 10 years ago, or maybe now, 10 years ago. We had to set up our own system within our database, and very few people used it because they didn't trust it. Even though we were CPI, even though we were compliant with all the security requirements. And, we didn't keep people's credit cards. The minute it was used for transaction, we shredded that information. But it's just become much more the norm for people to do everything by credit, debit, automatic deposit, automatic withdrawal. And so over the years, we've developed those systems. The frustration was, the online portal that we were using, yes, we had to pay a annual subscription fee for their service. And our donors, if they gave, had the option to cover fees or not. On the back end, we were already paying a percentage for every transaction. It was like 30 cents a transaction on top of our 2% overall annual fee, on top of our subscription fee. And then on top of that is the credit card fee. So our transactions could be anywhere from 3 to 4% a transaction plus a 30-cent fee. And yet on the back end, as much as you try to calculate with your mathematical formula and the way they told you to do it, you could manipulate how much percentage of the fee you wanted your donor to cover or not, or make it a default where they had to cover it. But from the beginning, we didn't do that because so many people were like, well, I'll do credit, but I'm not paying the fee. And we're like, okay, you can still pay by check, or whatever. But as it became more popular and more popular, people were starting to complain about the fees. And, I did this research along with other people in our finance department, and we're like, this is the norm in the industry, that they're going to make us pay a subscription in addition to a fee, and then on top of the credit card fee. This is all a process to get your donation to us, has to go through this third-party processor. It's going to cost us. Now, can we bargain for the best rates? Yes, and we have, but it's still going to be there. And it's just always been the frustration of making sure we have the right formula when we're setting up a page for donations or an event, that if somebody fairly wants to cover 100% of the fees, they can. And it's gotten better over the years, but there would be times where I have to go through these spreadsheets and I'm like, okay, so this is the percentage of the credit card they use. Oh, they use MasterCard, so it's 1% more. And, and I had to go down and break it all down to show the people, this is how it broke down. This is why we have a total number of fees. And this is why our net donation is less than what you thought it was going to be. And it's gotten a little easier to track. Our third-party processor has been very good about feedback. We're not the only nonprofit they service, but they've gotten a lot of feedback saying, look, this has not become viable for us to continue because we're losing a lot of money. Or if somebody wants to cover their fees and they're giving a very large donation, say $10,000 online, that's, a couple of $100 in fees that they have to cover as well. So it's been a learning curve, definitely, for both the donor and for us. And fortunately, I think at this point now, people understand the whole process because it's in so much of our market now. As long as we can give them the legitimate explanation and breakdown of the fees, they're comfortable giving us donations online.
So what are you seeing in your world, Chandra? Because I read in that bio you work with Dress for Success
Yes,
and
yeah.
a couple other nonprofits along the way. So what are you seeing in the rest of the world?
We're seeing they're passing it through in a lot of the areas. They're a little hesitant too. We do the Greek church in Southwest Florida has a big fundraiser. They have not been doing it, but at some of their events, they do it, and they can pass through a convenience fee. Or quite frankly, when we've done the Dress for Success events, we have asked at the time of checkout, would you like to cover the fees? Because they were a little concerned about the pushback as well. But I know these third-party platforms, a lot of them require Stripe or Square as an interface.
Yes.
And, they charge a platform fee on top of their interchange costs in the high threes and more. So, we're seeing it more and more in every industry. I mean, even the medical industry, because, it's really encroaching on pricing, on the price.
Wait, don't say that. Don't say that. Why? And I'll leave this with the story before we go to break here. We're gonna go to break in a second. Last October, I don't know if anybody else has heard this on the show, I had to have knee surgery.
Not again with the knee surgery.
Again. I'm looking for the sympathy card.
It's gone, honey. It's over. Get over it. You're fine. You can walk.
Ouch.
Well, how does that relate? The medical center wanted a credit card. So I'm like, you know what? I'm throwing in a credit card. So one way, I think, Cynthia, you interpreted it. They didn't charge me back the 3%. They did not.
They didn't. Oh, good.
But so I think what I wound up doing, and I exchanged my limbs for miles.
Of course you did.
That was the setup for the
sacrifice anything. He gave him a bit of tissue, and now he can walk better, so he can get to the airport. I mean, come on.
You better use them in a hurry. Let me tell you, because Tom just brought to my attention that some of these miles are expiring on us. There's a whole article on this that I'm going to publish. It's like all of us are paying so much for these miles, and it turns out to be the end consumer that really is going to be paying, as we know, because we're going to have to pass it on. But now our miles are expiring, so that's not good. So use your miles.
Before we get into the next segment, we wanted to let you know you're listening to Getting Down to Business with Mark Mondo on WVLP 103.1 FM, a community radio station out of Valparaiso, Indiana. Thanks for listening, and let's continue.
And we're back from break. Boy, we've had all this negativity about getting fees and passing them around, and who's the only one profiting? Visa, MasterCard, and American Express. But Chandra has found a solution, at least a partial one. She's going to help us strike back. She found something about a lawsuit about how merchants are actually striking against Visa, MasterCard and trying to claw some of those fees back. So tell us a little bit about that and how can they participate in this?
Sure. First of all, you want to mark your calendars for, May 31st, which is fastly approaching. The court was ordered. There were over 12 million merchants that brought this suit on to Visa and MasterCard. And the lawsuit, I'm going to read it verbatim, claims that the merchants paid excessive interchange fees to accept Visa and MasterCard cards together with the banks. It's not just Visa and MasterCard. It's the, acquiring banks, adopted rules and engaged in conduct that violated the antitrust laws. So hence Visa had to settle with these merchants. And there is a pool of $5.54 to $6.24 billion worth of settlement fees that merchants can claim on. And these are merchants that didn't participate in the earlier lawsuit, like Walmart, Costco, all the big guys, the big airlines, all of that. That money has been already paid out. This is for, the smaller and mid-level merchants to some of the large merchants that weren't participating in that litigation. So they have put aside so much of this interchange to be paid back to individuals like you, Mark, and this was during 2004 to 2019. So a 15-year span there. Now, are you going to get all of your merchant fees back? No, it's just going to be a percentage, but it's worth the claim. I don't think it's going to be a 54-cent claim. How Visa determines that on the end is going to be based on the pool of merchants that do submit a proper claim with their EIN number and do it in a timely fashion, and how many will to participate, what volume they did, how they accepted the cards will determine how much they get back. So maybe
for, it might be a couple good dinners two tree dinners between Cynthia and I, maybe over 15 years.
Definitely.
Or can put it towards a trip.
But there you go. There you
Trip.
go. There you go.
Well, so
right now they're not including the aggregators, meaning QuickBooks, to our knowledge, we're not sure, PayPal and Stripe. They're not participating, but there's still, there's always lawsuits happening between the associations and banks and all over the place. It's attorneys that make a lot of the money. So, this is your time to get something back.
Get a little psychic revenge. So to do that, what you can do, if you can either contact the show directly or go to mondocrm.com/contact, put your name and phone number and email in the notes, and then in the regarding field, just say Visa MasterCard lawsuit. I'll forward your details over to Chandra, and she'll hook you up.
We'll help you, but hurry because it's the time. The clock is ticking on this one.
This show goes on the air on May 11th. So, you got about 2-3 weeks there.
Brilliant.
So, that's one way to get money back. Now, another thing talked about is how are you going to protect your gains? You can go out and beat up different merchant service providers like Chandra, or, there's about 4 or 5 people in the Lake County area that I've gotten to know. They're all good service providers, but eventually the market will flush out the fees. So let's just keep it simple. 3% is about the market average. What happens on other ways to protect your gains? The one story that we thought of that we didn't think about, Chandra came up with this in our pre-production meeting, is protect your gains by, making sure your bookkeepers aren't, what do they say taking from the till?
Taking from the till in a myriad of ways. There's so many ways that this can happen, and it's not just bookkeepers. Anybody that handles your transactions and your money, you want to be watching what they do. In the restaurant industry, there's so many different ways, and even in retail, just not ringing up an item. We have several stories, one of which I was really proud of the merchant for doing, because for years he had this server working for him. And we take a lot of international cards in Southwest Florida, right? Mm-hmm. So for those of you that, travel internationally, when you use your card somewhere else, you have this higher cross-border interchange fee that you're paying, and the currency conversion. Well, one of our restaurants had a lot of German tourists in there. So this gal that was a waitress started bumping, and tip bumping isn't new. It's been going on for a long time. But she would know that she was being presented an international card, which is a higher interchange anyway, and she would change the tip portion on this.
Oh, change it. So the Germans would tip, but there was just a little extra.
And she wasn't really greedy at first. And then what happened was she started adding more and more and more. So her average tip was about $20 per check. She didn't get caught for this for years and years. The merchant called me and, said, what do I do? I want to press charges. Well, number one, she couldn't, and I got my husband involved in this because he knew law enforcement in this particular area. And we were trying to think, okay, what can we do? Yes, you can fire them, right? And that's what a lot of people do with this type of theft, is they just put it under the rug, fire the person, they're done with it, right? That person goes to work for someone else, unbeknownst that they're stealing. Well, this merchant, we sent law enforcement out and realized it couldn't be a crime against the merchant because it was actually a crime against the individual. So what we had that merchant do was reverse these fees, or reverse the charges to the merchant themselves. And now it was a crime against the business. And he actually had this woman arrested and taken away in handcuffs in front of his other staff, which was so admirable to see this actually happening. But this goes on all the time behind the scenes. And a lot of times if a manager isn't there, somebody's not checking the tip out, this can happen and you can slowly, lose money. And it's amazing when I speak to restaurants, when they're there, it seems like they're making more money than when they're not there. Surprise, surprise. So that's one story.
That's why I wanted to bring you in, because my work experience has only been in business to business stuff. So there's really no tip jar in what I do.
Right. But it happens in retail, right? And it happens with bookkeepers. Hence the story of, the accountant that we saw that embezzled over $106,000 from one business here in Southwest Florida. And I think another 30 or 40,000 from another.
Wowzers.
Yeah, posing as a bookkeeper. So
on that side of things, we'll go through a couple other causes or correlations, or maybe you're going to help us suggest how to. Again, you're getting those lock down your credit card fees, but let's talk about protecting your money as it comes in. There was something else you were talking about that I never thought of in retail, is turning off the credit switch. I guess. What's that about?
Some programs will do this for you, depending on the gateway or terminal you're using. They won't allow a credit unless an originating charge occurred. So that is a good thing. But you never know if somebody's coming in as a friend of a friend and they want to credit their credit card or give them free food. Talk with your merchant provider on this, because if you aren't manning the till all the time, somebody else could be giving away free food. They could be giving away free product, or they could be crediting somebody's credit card. And
just
we've seen
out of nowhere
with those prepaid cards, right? Crediting those. And then it's too late to reverse those charges. Look at your statements as well. Make sure you're reading your statements. I know some merchants that just get their statement every month, and throw it in the trash, or they never look at it if it's an online statement.
That's unbelievable to me. I mean, it's your business. So wouldn't you want to know what's going on? So that's unbelievable to me.
I don't know. So what do they look for? So if I have this statement and it's all these little individual, if I'm a restaurant, $10, $5, $6, $3, what trend lines would they have to look for to say, well, maybe something's not going so right?
Look at the credits. Anytime you see a credit or a chargeback, and that's another thing. If merchants don't respond to chargebacks quickly, they will automatically lose them. So that's another thing. And also and I hope all of your listeners are If they're in retail, they have EMV installed where they can take the chips, right? As opposed to swiping the card, which is going to cost them more. But more importantly, they'll automatically lose those chargebacks if they are not dipping the chip when they can. Automatically, they can't fight that chargeback. So those are some other tips there. But reviewing those statements every month, if something looks off, we even had a merchant go into the negative once on a day. And it was a restaurant again. Somebody knew how to, go around the system and do some credits. I mean, we've seen it all.
Well,
Wow.
another thing that I put in our notes here from our conversation earlier in the week was the worker rebellion. What do you see it like a disgruntled employee maybe trying to figure out a way to, they're just upset at you, or they don't feel like they're getting paid enough, or there's some kind of HR conflict going on and you may or may not know it, and all of a sudden you start seeing credits, or has there been some influence on that, especially after the COVID days?
Right. Some people just feel entitled to it and they justify it, I guess. It's hard enough for merchants, and especially in the service industry, getting workers. Everyone is complaining about that. And yes, you used to see it with pencils and paper, and in the restaurants, people would take ketchup and different things home. Now, if there's cash out there, you just want to remove it if you can, and utilize credit cards every way you can. It's worth the cost. It really is. Remove cash.
Anecdotally, I've only seen that, especially at a car wash of all places. They've turned into vending machine panels.
Yes, it's the automation. Automation is replacing servers. Even here, I saw the other day one of those little robots come out with water because, busboys, the minimum wage going up all over.
Yeah, in Illinois, I think is it 15 here, Cynthia? I'm not sure. I know Chicago's a little higher than Lake County, Illinois.
I'll look it up. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it's starting to raise in certain areas, and so I think we're going to start seeing more kiosks, and the kiosks won't accept cash. So I think that's coming. That, and what was that? I know I don't know. It's something called a friendly chargeback. What are those, like your friends? Like, oh yeah, that's a defective meal.
Right. The friendly chargebacks, and typically when we go into tough times, you will see this happen where people will. That used to be, they used to scratch out the mag stripe on the back of the card, right? And you'd have to key in the card. Damaging the chip, the same thing. If there's a number on it, they're keying in the card, you're going to lose the chargeback. Or, some people have made it, they know that at the end of the month, oh my gosh, I've got a $2,000 bill. I'll just dispute this charge, and this charge, right? And chances are those merchants that aren't looking for their chargeback or retrieval requests coming in the mail, that can just come right off their, merchant statement because of a merchant not, looking for this to happen.
So would that be like at a clothing store, like, oh, that jacket, I charged it back, even though I've got it still at home or something? Or what?
It could be, yes. Oh, yes. People charge back all the time. And that's another reason to make sure you have a merchant provider that is, on your side, that will help you with that and help you with the dispute. So, they should always get signatures. If something's not right, or they feel something's not right in store, I tell them to make sure I even give my merchants the old knuckle buster so I get a signature, right? I do. I still have them.
Nice.
You may not be able to imprint, but at least they can write it down and get a signature. And if they have that signatures, chances are they're going to win it. And it happens we had a merchant that the color of the granite was not exactly as the color that he saw that day that somebody else bought. So can you imagine $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 chargebacks? That hurts. So, putting all that information down on a contract is very important with the fine print. They may not win the chargeback, but they can always go to small claims court and fight that if they have a signature. So that's another thing that can protect your listeners.
Yeah, these things I never had to consider. And then something I know, bankruptcy chargeback. What does that mean?
Right. We've seen that before with banks that somebody's gone bankrupt on the last charges somebody had done, and the merchants, the bank initiated a chargeback. And we've had bank initiated chargebacks before, right?
Okay.
We've had those where the customer didn't charge it back. The bank was worried about fraud, so they charged it back. The merchant had nothing to do with it. We've probably had about 5 calls this month on this particular thing. Banks are trying to protect themselves in chargebacks, knowing, what's happening with our economy. They're, hedging up for this. So this is something that can happen, and a customer doesn't know, because we've called our merchants, called the card holders, and nobody initiated the charge, but the issuing bank did because they were concerned. And also we've heard that, when a bankruptcy happens, how can a bank protect themselves? They can push back those charges. Do they always do that? They say they don't, but we've seen it happen.
Understood. A couple other things that we were thinking about, I know we're going through a lot of fear factor here, but I think as a new business owner, these are just things I never thought of that could be in your way. And it's just stuff they don't teach you in business school. And some of the stuff has changed a little bit since I was last in school 30 years ago. There was another scam I've heard about. One of my top clients got beaten hard with this. It's something called check washing. He got hit. All I know is check washing and $11,000.
Yikes.
So he's been fighting the bank on that. And for the rest of the audience, what is check washing?
Well, I don't know if any of you have seen To Catch a Thief, that old program. Well, he goes and speaks around the country now about,
Oh, yes.
he did.
Yes. Frank
Well,
Abergal. Yeah.
Yes. Well,
Yeah,
you
good
remember
call.
in the olden days where the way that they were doing the check washing is they were actually pulling checks out of people's mailboxes, right? With a little flag up. So never do that. Never leave checks in there. And they would take the check and they would literally wash it, right? They changed the to and the from. That's where the original check washing came from. So that's what he would do, is he would change that check and then make it payable to himself or something else, maybe American Express. I can't even remember who he targeted at that time. And also now with the digital checks, it's a whole different ballgame, right? All you need is their routing number and their checking account number, get some check paper, down at office supply, and there you go. You can create your own checks.
I've noticed that a little bit on Amazon. Like, I could print my own checks on my inkjet printer over here.
Yes, we've been able to do that for a long time, and it's a scary thing. We also had a merchant that was broken into, and this is something your viewers should be wary of if their business has been broken into ever. They took checks. They left they took checks from the middle of the check pile. So the merchant didn't think their checks were,
oh no,
targeted, and then they found out later. So that was another bad story. They were hit pretty heavily on that. So immediately, if you have a break-in, you have a breach, you have anything like that, change your checking account.
Mm-hmm.
And don't write checks if you don't have to. Pay by credit cards, and I always pay by credit cards. If you pay by debit, you're utilizing a PIN number. It's harder to initiate a chargeback to protect yourself, right? But at least if you're reviewing your credit card statements, and hopefully you are, that, you're not going to have those issues. And if you do, then you can call your bank. So keep an eye on that as well, from both standpoints.
Now,
Well,
those statements are there for a reason.
you could, yeah, they definitely, I get to review mine on a monthly basis and try to figure out what the heck happened. So
You
the other thing
do.
we've noticed a
That's
couple
good.
more.
You both are very diligent. Many merchants and card holders are not, and that's how these criminals get away from.
Yeah. I
with
put
it.
all the alerts I can on my cards. So I get pinged a lot. And I'm like, oh, okay, yes, that was a correct charger. And I'd rather be annoyed with all these pings and to prompt me to go in and look at my account than not to know what's going on until it's too late. Yeah.
Sure, sure. And I know it's a hassle because there's so much happening right now with credit card theft and breaches
Mhm.
and everything along those lines. That, some of these merchants that do a lot of transactions might want a product called an account updater for recurring billing. I thought I'd put that in there because it is a hassle, especially on your with donations, right? If somebody gets hit, now they're changing cards. How much does it cost to have somebody go out there and call to get a new card? And will they continue the recurring service or will they continue, donating?
Right. Yeah, that's always a very diplomatic, delicate dance because we don't want them, to feel underappreciated that we're just after their money. So we always send out an email that is very much thankful for their support and sorry that there is this situation. And if they would like to rectify it with us, to please give us a call. But yeah, we're not going to hound them on that. And we've had people that say, oh yeah, my car got hacked again. So sorry, I'll go in and update my information. Or some people just forget they switched cards on what accounts they have on those other cards. But it's a delicate thing. You don't want people to feel ashamed or annoyed, when those situations. So we have to be very understandably delicate with them and be supportive of their situation. Yeah. That can.
And that PCI compliance is there for a reason. I know we hate
Yes.
that term. And I
Yes.
think we all want to skip over that, but this is a perfect opportunity to speak about. This is a time where you can get your employees, you can get your merchants to take notice. Hey, what do I need to change? Do I need to change something in my responsibilities checklist for my employees, right? We're not going to store card data. That's the worst thing. I've walked into merchants that have files upon files upon file cabinets that aren't locked. And they have, what do they have? Credit card data on the top of their contracts, a lot of service contracts. I've been in those places. Well, any, person that's working for you that's dishonest has free access to those credit cards. So, the PCI, I know it's there for a reason. People don't like doing it, but really make it a good thing. Make it a security check where, you're looking at your networks, you're looking at your people, you're making sure they understand they don't just write down card numbers on a piece of paper.
Let's wrap it up on a fun story about security. Because Chandra,
this is a good story.
Where are you speaking from? Talking about security.
I am speaking from my dad's Atlas missile base in Washington State.
Hold on a sec. You're talking like the doomsday prepper type, like you're able to, it's coming, it's on its way. You got the big door. See y'all later.
It's a 40-ton door that automatic. It takes a while. It takes about a half hour to close. But yes, my dad he purchased 30 years ago an old Atlas missile base that the government had abandoned. And it was quite a feat. It was in a lot of mud and he totally rehabbed it. He was an engineer and this was his passion. He loved it. And now it's livable and we're ready for the doomsday.
Sweet.
We'll pack our bags and join you.
Yeah, pack the bags. No, actually, we are selling it. It is a wonderful, wonderful place. And he did incredible work here.
So what Chandra can do is fire a missile,
Yes.
Be protected. What? Oh, no missiles left?
No,
No.
Darn it, darn it.
No.
So well, we are with that in mind. Chandra is safe. She's helping you keep your money safe. She's helping you spend less on those darn merchant fees. And we're going to reach the end of the hour. So we'd like to thank Cynthia for keeping me especially on the level and on time.
it's my lifelong cause, but I do it willingly.
Willingly, that's right. And Chandra, thank you for reporting in from our first guest calling in from a missile base.
Well, thank you very much for interviewing me, and hopefully we've given your listeners some tips that will help save them money overall and keep them safe.
Thank you, Chandra.
Thank you.
If you missed some of the show today, you can listen to the replay on Thursday at 1 p.m. Central Time on WVLP 103.1 FM or live stream at www.wvlp.org. And we store the past shows on Mark's website at www.mondocrm.com/podcast, or you can listen to the podcast on your favorite app at any time. We're listed in the major podcast applications. Just search for Mark Mondo and the show will come up, and you can subscribe to the show for the latest updates. And the show is now on YouTube. Just search for Mondo CRM or Getting Down to Business with Mark Mondo, and the episodes will come up on the YouTube feed. Thank you very much for spending time with us today, and we look forward to you joining us again next week.